One ambient AI scribe claim says providers reduce documentation time by up to 76%. A large peer-reviewed multi-site observational study found a different number: 16 fewer documentation minutes for every 8 hours of scheduled patient care, 76% or 16 minutes. That looks like a contradiction. It is not. The first number is a maximum from a vendor press release. The second is an adjusted average association across 5 academic health systems. They use different populations, baselines, exposure thresholds, and endpoints. Both numbers can be true, and neither one, by itself, tells you whether the tool improved the clinical record, reduced risk, or helped a patient. This is independent analysis. Signal Rounds has no sponsorship or paid promotion from an ambient-scribe vendor. Every material claim is tied to the public sources in the description. The question is not whether ambient scribes can save time. The evidence increasingly suggests that some of them can for some clinicians. The useful question is, how much time, measured how, for whom, and what work moves somewhere else? On June 25th, Sevocity and Suki announced an ambient documentation integration for independent practices. The release says that in early deployments of Suki's technology, providers reduced documentation time by up to 76%. That is the exact claim. Here is what the public release does not provide: the number of clinicians, the baseline documentation time, the study period, the comparison group, the product use threshold, the average effect, the result distribution, or a confidence interval. And the phrase "up to" matters. It identifies an upper end result. It does not tell us what the typical clinician experienced. The release does not say whether 76% came from one site, one specialty, one workflow, or one especially heavy user. That does not prove the claim is false. It means the claim is not decision grade by itself. If your baseline is 40 minutes after clinic, a 76% reduction means something very different than reducing 10 minutes of active note editing. If one number measures time in note and another measures total documentation workflow, including review, corrections, orders, coding, and exceptions, they are not interchangeable. A percentage can sound precise while the underlying question remains undefined. Now compare that with the 2026 JAMA study led by Lisa Rotenstein and colleagues. This was a 5-site study of 8,581 ambulatory clinicians at U.S. academic institutions. 1,809 adopted an AI scribe. The others served as non-adopter controls. The investigators used a difference in differences design and normalized EHR activity to 8 scheduled patient care hours. After adoption, total EHR time was associated with a reduction of 13.4 minutes per 8 scheduled hours. The 95% confidence interval was 9.1 to 17.7 minutes. Documentation time was associated with a reduction of 16.0 minutes, with a confidence interval from 13.7 to 18.3 minutes. Those are related measures. Do not add them together. The authors described the changes as 3.3% lower total EHR time and 11.7% lower documentation time. After hours, EHR time did not change significantly, and adoption was associated with about 0.49 additional visits per clinician per week, roughly 1 extra visit every 2 weeks on average. The estimates were larger in primary care, among advanced practice clinicians, among female clinicians, and among clinicians who use the scribe in at least half of visits. That variation is not noise to discard, it is part of the result. A tool may be valuable overall while producing very different returns across specialties, schedules, note styles, and adoption intensity. But this was still observational. The adopters were not randomly assigned. Implementation differed by site. The institutions were academic, with average weekly volume around 20 visits. The study did not measure burnout or determine where the saved time went. It is stronger evidence than a press release maximum. It is not a universal causal estimate. The paper also was not conflict-free. It reported independent institutional and public interest funding with no funder role in the study, but some authors disclosed relationships or institutional interests involving ambient AI companies, including Augmedix and Abridge. That does not erase the results. It keeps the word independent honest. A separate pragmatic randomized trial in NEJM AI tested two specific products, Microsoft, DAX Copilot, and Nabla, against usual care. 238 outpatient physicians across 14 specialties were randomized at one academic institution. Actual use remained incomplete. DAX was used in about 1/3 of eligible visits, and Nabla in just under 30%. Nabla users had a statistically significant 9.5% reduction in time and note compared with control. DAX showed a 1.7% reduction, but the confidence interval crossed zero and the result was not statistically significant. That is not evidence that DAX never saves time. It is evidence that this trial did not establish a significant effect for DAX on that endpoint during that study. Secondary survey estimates suggested possible improvements in burnout, task load, and work exhaustion for users of either product. The authors said those findings need confirmation in larger multi-center trials. Participants also reported clinically significant inaccuracies occurring occasionally, and the study recorded one mild adverse event. One randomized trial, two products, different findings. Ambient-scribe is a category, not a treatment with one stable effect size. Quironsalud provides the other side of the picture, implementation at scale. Its 2026 study described more than 2.33 million scribe-assisted outpatient encounters over 16 months, with adoption rising from under 3% to about 31% of visits. That matters. A tool that survives millions of encounters has crossed an operational threshold that a laboratory demo has not. But the reported consultation duration difference was modest, about 15.01 versus 14.65 minutes. In later months, moved toward parity. The study reported semantic agreement between generated and clinician-validated documentation of roughly 87 to 89%. That is semantic agreement, not independently adjudicated clinical accuracy. The clinician surveys had response rates of 14.7 and 7.8%. The study did not directly measure patient outcomes, clinical outcomes, after-hours EHR use, or correctness against an independent ground truth. And quality deserves its own measurement. A Veterans Health Administration evaluation compared 11 AI scribe tools with human note takers across 5 standardized primary care cases. Human-generated notes scored higher across all 5 cases, and all 10 measured quality domains. That study was simulated, and the human notes were not produced under normal workflow constraints. It does not settle real-world quality. It does show why time saved and note quality cannot be treated as the same endpoint. So what should a CMIO, CNIO, clinic leader, or informatics team ask before calling an ambient scribe successful? First, what is the denominator? Is the headline based on all enrolled clinicians, active users, high-frequency users, completed notes, or a best-performing subgroup? Second, what is the endpoint? Time and note, total EHR time, after-hours work, visit length, note closure, or self-reported burden are different outcomes. Third, what happened to review labor? A draft can reduce typing while increasing verification. Measure edit time, omission correction, unsupported additions, and exception handling, not merely generation speed. Fourth, what happened downstream? Ambient documentation increasingly feeds structured problems, orders, coding, decision support, nursing summaries, and revenue cycle workflows. A correction made in the note is cheap. The same error propagated into 5 workflows is not. Fifth, who owns the final record? Human review is not a control unless the reviewer has enough expertise, time, usable interface cues, escalation rights, and an audit trail. A fatigued clinician clicking through a plausible draft is a billing step, not a safety architecture. And sixth, What clinical or patient outcome changed? The evidence reviewed here supports a likely operational benefit for some clinicians. It does not establish lower diagnostic error, better treatment decisions, safer care, or improved patient outcomes. Those may come later. They should not be smuggled into a time-saving metric now. Here is the signal. The 76% claim is a legitimate vendor-reported maximum with an undisclosed public denominator. The 16-minute estimate is a stronger, peer-reviewed, multi-site observational result, but it is modest on average, heterogeneous across clinicians, and not a product-wide randomized effect. The randomized evidence shows that two ambient scribes can perform differently on the same endpoint, and the quality evidence says faster documentation cannot be assumed to mean better documentation. Operational efficiency is not clinical effectiveness. A vendor metric is not independent validation. In human review is not automatically a control. Ambient scribes may be useful, some already appear to be, but before treating a headline as ROI, demand the denominator, the comparator, the endpoint, the exposure level, and the ownership model. That is how you get beyond the demo. I'm Darian Jones. This is Signal Rounds. Human Judgment, Machine Signal.